is the future is queer. And before I go any further, I want to talk about language for a minute. So hopefully this word doesn't get in the way of you hearing me. How am I using this word queer today? And I want to recognize that it is a fraught word because it has been used to harm and to label, especially gay men in a certain era, in a harmful way. It is one of those words that unless you are a part of the LGBTQ community or in really accountable relationship with folks in the LGBTQ community, I would caution you against throwing it around too easily. But today I am using it, and I'm using it on a couple of different levels. So first, I am actually using it in the old-fashioned sense of the word queer to mean just something that is mysterious or strange or unknown. And I am also using it in the new fashion sense of the word to mean the word that has been reclaimed by the LGBTQ liberation movement as an umbrella descriptor of a wide range of sexual orientations and gender identities. I'm using it as a word that means a liberating affirmation of a spectrum of human experiences. And I'm using it, friends, to describe a way of looking at the world with an attitude that questions norms, transgresses expectations in the service of love and liberation, and opens up possibilities for the future. That is how I use it when I name my own identity as a queer person myself. So now that I've gotten a little clear about language, what do I mean when I say the future is queer? The future is queer because I don't think we have ever, at least in my lifetime, been so unsure about what will happen tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. Who the hell knows? We have now been sitting in the midst of a huge uncertainty for 3 months of a global pandemic. Planning ahead for anything seems somewhat impossible right now, though some folks are trying very hard to get back to quote unquote normal. The future is queer because there is no going back to normal. We are in the midst of a global change process that cannot be ignored or dismissed, and no one knows exactly how it's going to unfold. This, of course, is always true, right? It's always true. We never really know what the future holds. We human beings just really like to think that we can predict or that we can control, that we can determine the future. Well, right now we can't pretend that. The future is queer. The future is queer because even the things we think are predictable are not. They are extra unpredictable. I just want to name the 2 Supreme Court decisions this week as examples. Who would have predicted that this court this week would have finally outlawed discrimination in the workplace based on sexual orientation and gender identity? Who would have predicted that? I want to make sure all of you who are allies here this morning know how big a deal this is. Prior to this decision, in more than half of the states of our nation, last week, it was still legal to fire workers for being gay or bisexual or transgender. Last week, over half the states in this nation. So while this ruling doesn't fix everything, it is a huge expansion of protection for LGBTQ folks. I cannot tell you the number of people I know personally, in my individual relationships as well as my ministry relationships, who have felt that they have had to hide. They have felt that they have had to hide something fundamental about who they are for fear of being fired from their job. So let us not forget that this ruling this week lays on the foundation of the Civil Rights Act and the work and sacrifices of the civil rights movement led by African American people in this country. This week, at least, there is more room for us to breathe and to belong. And who would have predicted that this court this week would have ruled in favor of the dreamers? Those young people brought here as children from other countries who were just wanting a chance to stay in the only home they've ever known, a chance to study, a chance to work, a chance to contribute to this society, a chance to be free. This week, at least, there is more space for them to breathe, space for them to belong. Who would have predicted? The future is queer indeed, and I, for one, am grateful for that. It may be scary sometimes right now how unknown and how uncertain things feel, but it also means that anything is possible. Not just the bad and the scary, but also the beautiful and the life-giving. The future is queer because we work to make it so, because we are willing to question the norms that we swim in, question the privileges that we carry, be honest about our true selves, and work to change systems so that there is more room for everyone to breathe, to belong. And this, my friends, is one of the gifts of the LGBTQ liberation movement. That movement that we celebrate this month of Pride, that was sparked, frankly, by what some would call a riot, but others would call an uprising. Despite how much Pride has been commodified and commercialized, let us not forget this month that we have this celebration of Pride because in 1969, the patrons at the Stonewall Inn in New York City fought back against a police raid. That uprising was led by transgender women of color. Especially, I want to name today Martha P. Johnson, but not just her. Today, we remember her and all those who rose up those nights because they rose up because they knew in their bodies and in their lives that the way things are, the way things were told have to be, is not the way things actually have to be. You know, we are told that this is the space we have to live in so many different ways. Different ones of us are told that over and over and over. But those uprisings and the uprisings we're seeing today come from people who are saying the way things are is not the way things have to be. There is so much more beautiful possibility than quote unquote normal. There is the possibility of men loving men and women loving women, and a whole beautiful spectrum of human expression of gender outside of those two small categories of man and woman. The future is queer. It is open. It is full of possibility if we have the faith and the courage to make it a reality. This Pride Month, as I said, we are in the midst of other uprisings around this country, demanding that the structures of our society, particularly the criminal justice and policing structures of our society, recognize that Black lives matter. And this is a struggle that is not separated from the struggle for LGBTQ rights. Just describing the uprisings that happened in 1969, where transgender women of color were fighting back against a police raid, helps you see those interconnections. This is not a struggle that's separated from the struggle for immigrant rights. It is not a struggle separated from the struggle for additional mental health resources in our country, or for access to food or housing or education for all people. The Black Lives Matter movement is a struggle for a queer future because it asks us, especially white people, to think way beyond the categories and systems we are accustomed to. It is a struggle for a queer future because it asks us to consider the possibility of a future we may not have yet even imagined, but we feel calling to us. So let me give you an example. For example, can we live into a future where the police aren't the only place to call for everything from a hostage situation to broken taillights to domestic disputes to mental health crisis response? We are being called to ask, what does true public safety look like? Who is protected and by whom? I want to give you an example that happened just this week in one of our Unitarian Universalist congregations that I think gives a glimpse that might spark our imagination further for a different kind of future. Helps me imagine the possibilities anyway. So my colleague, Reverend Jason Leiden, serves a congregation in Chicago. And I know it's a big city. We don't live in a big city. But I want you to just hear the story and then think about, what could we learn from this in Blount County? So this is what he wrote just a couple of days ago. Yesterday, our congregational administrator contacted me because she had found these very weird packages in our mailbox that when she opened, she discovered had pills inside and a bunch of baggies of a crystallized substance. It looked like meth, potentially. Rather than call the police, I called the Chicago Recovery Alliance. They are a harm reduction organization in our city that provides support to active drug users. They came within a few hours. They picked everything up to both be tested and destroyed. They test substances, they find, so that they have a better understanding of what substances are circulating in the city that they should be prepared to educate users about. Had the police come, they would have focused more on the packaging, who sent it, and possibly increased surveillance on the church. By calling the Chicago Recovery Alliance, we not only got rid of those weird substances, we are hopefully sharing information that will potentially keep drug users in our city safer. It's the end of the quote from Jason. So perhaps because of that call to the Chicago Recovery Alliance instead of the police, there are a few people who can breathe more freely today. I want you to imagine with me for just a moment, what could we do if we funded these kinds of harm reduction organizations in Appalachia? Instead of filling our local jails with addicts, we might figure out a different way towards health. Or imagine with me if we funded a program to train public safety officers more deeply in ways to intervene and de-escalate domestic disputes, instead of spending $1 million on a shooting range to train public safety officers to shoot to kill. What could that look like in our community? How many more women and children might be safer in safer situations if we did that? So one of the calls of the Black Lives Matter movement, which gets simplified in a hashtag, is defund the police. But it's much more complicated than that. It is a positive movement to fund more deeply and more thoughtfully those things that will keep people in better safety in community. As Pam McMichael, the former director of the Highlander Center here in Tennessee, writes, "It is true that when society stretches to systemically address oppression and injustice for one group of people, life gets better all around. A society more fair and just for Black people is a society more fair and just for us all." May we be ones to affirm that the future is queer. And I have to say, y'all, the affirmations of our faith tradition call us to this. We believe in continuing revelation that the future is never foreclosed. We can continue to learn and change. We believe in the worth and dignity of every person, that no one should have to hide themselves in order to be seen as human. We believe that the diversity of life and human expression is beautiful and a sacred strength. We believe that we are fundamentally bound up with one another in an interdependence that is not based on biological family relationships, but that is expressed in how well we can seek to understand and care and sacrifice for each other, even those people very different from one another. James Baldwin, the great writer, a gay Black man, wrote in 1964, he said this, "For nothing is fixed forever and forever and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out." Friends, the future is queer. It is not fixed, it is unknown, and it is up to us to collaborate with love, to witness the generations that come behind us, to hold each other tightly, and to say that there are yet beautiful possibilities to unfold. The future is queer, a place to belong, a place to breathe. May it be so, and may we be the ones to make it so. Amen.